Alright, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. It's me, Addy, again, and I hope you guys are doing alright. So, it finally happened. After 18 years of sleeping on what many consider to be one of, if not the greatest horror games of all time, I finally got around to playing the original Resident Evil 4. So, equipped with my jacket. It's not exactly Leon Kennedy's jacket, but it is a jacket for whatever that's worth. Just let me have this moment, goddammit. But with my jacket, I'm here to roundhouse kick you guys with the usual review. So let's get started. So just like the numerical entry of this game, Resident Evil 4 is the fourth game that I played in the series. I started with the remake to 2 a couple years before I even began streaming, and then, a lot of you might already know this, I played through Resident Evil 7 and 8. The latter of which remains my favorite entry in the series and my personal favorite horror game in general. I was particularly excited to fire up the fourth one more recently for two reasons. Number one, of course, is because the remake to 4 is right around the corner, and it looks incredible. And number two, I'd heard a lot of people liken Resident Evil 8, which is, of course, my favorite one, to this game, and even go so far as to say that a lot of what's presented in the 8th game stems from this classic 2005 title. So of course, I just had to jump on in and experience the genesis of everything I loved about Resident Evil 8. And not only that, but also the birth, as many people say, of the action horror genre in general, as Resident Evil 4 marks the series' first major departure from its traditional survival horror roots. And let me tell you guys, it was an absolute fucking honor to experience. So first and foremost, what really took me by surprise was how incredibly advanced the game was for its time. Barring the visuals and the controls and a couple of other things I'm going to talk about in a little bit here, almost everything in this game has aged like fine wine and has been executed to a degree that puts even a lot of modern games to shame. And to me, it was the incredibly sophisticated enemy AI that exemplified that most. The enemies you'll fight in this game are extraordinarily intelligent and will react and adapt to your tactics in various astounding ways, making each encounter feel unique and challenging. And I can even pinpoint for you guys the specific part of the combat in this game that convinced me it was no joke in this department. And it was a ladder of all things. You know what? I'm just gonna let the following clip fill you in on what I mean by that. Roll a clip. Oh my god, they're all coming up. Oh, that's why you can knock things down. I get it. That's so cool. So when they're climbing up the ladders... Oh my, and they put the ladder back up? Yo, what the fuck? This AI is insane. This shit is legitimately crazy. And you're telling me they're remaking this? Why? So yeah, considering how 18 years after this game's release, I was experiencing things that made me appreciate this game significantly more than a lot of modern releases, made me wonder why the hell they're even remaking Resident Evil 4. And the fact that a remake to a game that is already damn near perfect looks to be improving upon everything in that experience from what we've seen so far makes me so damn excited to play the remake when it's out. But okay, besides the enemies and how they behave, what else is included in this package that really blew my mind? Let's talk about Leon, the main protagonist you'll play as who takes down these said bad guys and dictates almost everything that makes Resident Evil 4 so thoroughly enjoyable. In Resident Evil 4, you'll continue series icon Leon Kennedy's story following the events of Resident Evil 2. And right off the bat, I love the direction they take his character and how that influences the tone of the story and gameplay presented here. In 2, he's this guy who's just so full of optimism, looking forward to his first day of being a police officer and fulfilling his noble duties. But in this cruel twist of fate, he's immediately thrust into this horrific zombie apocalypse, which leaves a traumatic and dejected mark on him during its aftermath. And years later, he returns in 4, now a bit more serious, yet cocky and surprisingly suave after the events of the second game. But he still retains that sense of nobility and professionalism. And as a new Special Forces agent, he's tasked with saving the US president's daughter from a mysterious cult in a rural village in Spain, where the inhabitants have all succumbed to yet another one of the Resident Evil series' horrible biohazards, turning them into crazed abominations of various grotesque shapes and sizes that Leon will need to take down. But as a seasoned SCP slayer, and with that newfound cocky nature of his, Leon wrecks these bad guys and downplays a lot of the trauma he harbors from the second game with a surplus of cheesy one-liners and flashy over-the-top combat maneuvers like these badass backflips, roundhouse kicks, and so much more, all of which give Resident Evil 4 a very distinct identity as an exuberant game. And I'd heard about that going into Resident Evil 4. I had heard that it was very over the top, melodramatic, and at some points completely absurd. So I assumed that after playing this game, I would appreciate that dramatic action gameplay that this experience is lauded for, but that I might ultimately roll my eyes on several occasions during the story's campier moments. But funnily, you guys, I never did roll my eyes, despite there being many eye-roll-worthy moments that did admittedly make me laugh out loud, but they never made me loathe them or cringe in any way. Why is this so enjoyable though? Like, why do I like this so much? Why? Why am I not rolling my eyes? I think it's because despite this game being really campy and cheesy, none of that goofiness really comes at the expense of this game's creepiness and horror, which are still very much present here. My main concern going into Resident Evil 4 was that this game wouldn't be scary whatsoever, and while admittedly it isn't the scariest Resident Evil game I've played personally, for me that one's 7, it does still retain many of the anxiety-inducing and terrifying staples of a Resident Evil game, such as the long dark corridors with seemingly unkillable brutes menacingly chasing you down, or my personal favorite device, ordinary looking people doing uncanny to straight up nightmarish things to hurt you badly. Despite the high octane energy that Leon brings to the table in this experience, it's still not enough to fully stop the gloominess of Resident Evil from disturbing you. And ultimately, this makes for a game that is simultaneously scary and action-packed to the brim, which in my opinion is precisely what you would want out of a horror game and what makes Resident Evil 4 so good. Why is the action itself so good here, right? You can still have an action-packed game that isn't fun to play, right? And from my experience, guys, I think that the reason why Resident Evil 4's action is so great is because of a combination of its immersion and novelty. This game is so immersive, not only due to its incredibly smart and realistic enemy AI like I was talking about earlier, but also due to its atmosphere, sound design, and more, all of which are complemented by really fluid game mechanics that combine Leon attacking with an arsenal of really cool ranged weapons and flashy melee attacks as he progresses through various levels and environments, harboring so many secrets that beckon multiple playthroughs from you to discover. And speaking of which, the level design here is phenomenal. With how much there is to explore, the variety of horrific enemies there are to fight, which never cease to surprise me until the very end, by the way, and how each of these areas so cleverly intertwine with one another through a series of puzzles that were surprisingly fun to do. And this is coming from someone who isn't even a big fan of puzzles in most games. But the level design is also amazing because of how each level constantly offers you something fresh and engaging to deal with, which factors into that novelty that I was talking about as well. From the opening village sequence to the final boss fight, Resident Evil 4 always has something new and exciting for you to tangle with. Whether it's fighting chainsaw-wielding maniacs or navigating through a sprawling castle filled with traps, the game always keeps you on your toes and at the edge of your seat. And I think it's remarkable how the novelty doesn't just stop there, as it's also influenced heavily by the game's various unique set pieces, all of which are amazing, you guys. There are some truly memorable and creative set pieces in this game, ranging from mechanically unique boss fights to thrilling vehicular escapes, all of which feel like major events that add so much overall excitement to the game. With how much the opening of this game paralleled that of Resident Evil 8, and how the game reminded me of being in a theme park and getting to experience each exhilarating set piece in the form of various rides, which is exactly how I felt with Resident Evil 8, it didn't take long for me to see why people drew so many comparisons between the two games, and Resident Evil 4 made me feel like I was falling in love with my favorite Resident Evil experience all over again. Hell, I would go so far as to rank Resident Evil 4 as my second favorite game in the series, right after 8, regardless of the fact that the two games are 16 years apart and that I've played the much more recent ones like 7 and 2 Remake, which I would probably place in my third and fourth spots respectively after 4. The game is just that good. I just enjoyed it that much. And it ticks all of my boxes for what I personally want out of a horror game that I clearly established with Resident Evil 8. As for a few of the specific reasons as to why I still like 8 more than 4, one of them is because I personally prefer the first-person gameplay to the third-person, and some of these might be hot takes, so prepare yourselves, alright? But another reason is that I like Ethan a little bit more as a protagonist than Leon. While Leon is a great character, I felt like I could imprint on Ethan a little better and found his status as this underdog and downtrodden guy to be a lot more resonant to me. And I also found the story, setting, and tones of Resident Evil 8 to appeal to me a little more than that of 4's. And lastly, there were a couple of gripes that I did have with 4 that I am going to go into in a little bit here. But nevertheless, Resident Evil 4 still has a thoroughly engaging story. Keeping in tradition with the rest of the series, 4 features a basic premise. Like I mentioned earlier, Leon has to rescue the president's daughter from a mysterious cult, and the rest of the story, which is full of amazing twists and turns, builds itself upon this very simple premise, which is a storytelling approach I've noticed being employed by all of the RE games that I've played so far, and one that I actually kind of love. But despite having a nice balance of campiness and creepiness that keeps you invested in its story, I can't say that I was particularly fond of many of its characters besides maybe Leon himself and Lewis. Unfortunately, you guys, I wasn't at all a fan of Ashley, the president's daughter who you'll spend a majority of your time with as Leon. While the gimmick she added to the gameplay in the form of being a companion you had to protect was really fun and raised the stakes, it was really difficult for me to empathize with her character since, sadly, she felt more like a plot device than anything. And yes, even though we do get to play as her for a limited period of time in the game, which was kinda neat, she still doesn't get enough character development to evolve from being a mere helpless damsel in distress who also happens to just scream a little too incessantly. Oh my god, and she still continues screaming and shit? Okay, that warrants a lowering up the volume. I mean, it's one thing to scream when you're being kidnapped, right? I will never blame you for that, of course. But a wholly other grating beast when you're not even in an iota of danger. Help! Ashley, behave. I'll be right back. Help! Ashley, shut up! Oh, gold bars come to Papa. And the worst part of it all is the subpar voice acting that is so representative of voice work for games in the early 2000s, which is yet another facet of Resident Evil 4 that I think is a product of its time and hasn't aged well, at least in my opinion.
My name's Leon. I'm under the president's order to rescue you.
What? My father?
That's right. And I have to get you out of here. Now come with me.
So not only is her screaming annoying, but the voice work for it is absolutely cursed as well. I swear, man, all I'm going to associate her character with going forward until the remake, I hope, is a girl who just screeched, "Leon, Leon, Leon!" a whole bunch. I mean, shit. I feel like now that I said his name 3 times into the camera, I'm going to summon Ashley like Bloody Mary or something, where she's just going to hijack this video and completely corrupt this review and make everything seem really cursed. Which sucks because I really wanted to like her, man. I don't like that I'm saying things like this about her. I mean, she genuinely had a lot of potential in this game, and she should have been a likable character, given that she's essentially Leon's traveling companion, and should have had a nice dynamic with him, you know what I mean? So yeah, Ashley kind of sucks. But hey, you know what? This, alongside all the outdated elements of the original game, such as the voice acting, camera movement, visuals, controls, and just quality of life features in general, is a great example of an area that the remake has a solid opportunity to improve upon, in the same way that, you know, the remake to Final Fantasy VII took its cast of characters from the original game and made them so much more amazing. Even though in the case of that game, they were actually kind of great already. And playing through Resident Evil 4, there were so many little areas I spotted where, you know, I thought to myself, hey, this little bare bone sequence here could maybe be a great area to expand upon in order to build up Leon and Ashley's dynamic in the remake and turn her into a much more fleshed out and likable character. And since we're on the topic of the outdated vestiges of this 2005 GameCube game, another one I want to dedicate a little second to talking about here are the QuickTime events, or QTEs. Now here's something funny, you guys. I never in my entire life could see the problem that people had with QuickTime events, which, as I understand, the remake is going to be getting rid of. And hey, you know what? Admittedly, I personally thought they were a fun and interactive embellishment for most games, but it was only after playing Resident Evil 4 that I realized there were 2 kinds of QTEs. The ones that everyone hated, and the ones that I didn't mind. And until that point, I never experienced the former. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that Resident Evil 4 was chock full of them. I'm of course talking about the cutscene based QTEs, where one second you're enjoying your cup of tea, watching a cutscene, and the next a series of buttons appear so jarringly on your screen, causing you to spill your tea on your lap and burn yourself trying to press the buttons, only to miss the prompt by a millisecond and watch your character's head get chopped off, forcing you to then rewatch the whole cutscene again just to be able to do the QTE correctly. This game made me feel the frustrating and punishing nature that QTEs get a bad rap for, especially during the segments of the game that inexplicably require you to mash a button so fucking hard in your controller until your finger falls off, and where if you don't feel chronic wrist pain afterwards, you didn't do it right and have to restart everything. There you go! Literally, how hard am I meant to mash these buttons? This is like the third time this happened.
Her involved just for that?
So yeah, I mean, I really have nothing other to say about them other than they're ridiculous, and that I'm now totally on board with the remake getting rid of them in favor of much more involved gameplay mechanics, which I am incredibly excited for, judging by what we've seen from the trailers. And not just those, but the chainsaw demo. Like, guys, I did just recently play through the chainsaw demo of Resident Evil 4, which you can check out, by the way, on my channel. It was my last video. And my god, through first impressions alone, I am so confident that all these little wrinkles with the original game are going to get ironed out in the most satisfying way possible. And that all the things that weren't issues with it that made it the masterclass in the horror genre that it is are just going to be elevated even further. And those facets are what ultimately make Resident Evil 4 earn a terrifying 9 out of 10 from me. Look, had I played this game back in the early 2000s, where I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have had any gripes with the now dated elements of this game, I don't think I'd have hesitated to consider this one a 10 out of 10, and seriously put this up there with the likes of The Elder Scrolls Oblivion or Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core as games that I had an unhealthy obsession with and replayed ad nauseum. But even though I didn't grow up with this game and don't have the nostalgia associated with it that most people do, the fact that I can still appreciate the ever-living hell out of it 18 years later and be wowed by how it still reflects better game design than most modern AAA releases that I've played is a testament to how much of a timeless classic it is. Resident Evil 4 kicks ass. I mean, literally it does. I mean, yeah, Leon does do some crazy kickboxing and shit, so it literally does kick ass. And I am beyond excited for its remake. So guys, if you do want to check out our amazing playthrough of the remake when that's out, make sure you go over to twitch.tv/irritableiNdian ASAP and follow me there. And hey, if you enjoyed this review, do be sure to like and subscribe to this channel, because I've got plenty more of these on the way, including some other types of crazy content like reactions and Let's Plays as well. And speaking of the latter, I am going to be posting the full playthrough of our Resident Evil 4 streams here on the YouTube channel. I'm going to be taking all the streams, condensing them into one easily digestible video for you guys to enjoy. And I will inevitably also post videos of the remake when that's out, so do stay on the lookout for that. But guys, thank you. Thank you so much for just watching and supporting the channel in general. We recently hit 200 subscribers after having just made it to our first 100 only 3 months ago, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me. And this just makes me feel so encouraged, right? I just feel really encouraged by all of you to continue pursuing my passion of making content here and on Twitch. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. So you guys, stay happy, stay healthy, stay positive, and as always, keep on keeping on.